One Piece has done it again. Eiichiro Oda has put drawings onto paper and we are going to talk about them, this time featuring a very robotsome twist. Starting with the cover story, I am beyond elated that Yamato has finally embarked on the great hot pot pilgrimage that is following in the footsteps of Kozuki Oden. And in the background, we see what I thought was the prisoner mine at Udon at first. It looks a lot like that, but that's actually going to be one of the very last places that Yamato visits according to the Kinemon travel agency itinerary. So what we're actually seeing here is Kibi, an area that we didn't actually get to visit during the Wano arc. There wasn't time. We had 4 years, but there was no time. And it's very depressing because the prisoner mine was a particular low point in the Wano landscape, the epitome of all the suffering and destruction used to make Kaido's weapons. But this is a good reminder that that was just the standard across Wano. It's a pretty big wake-up call because we actually left Wano in a pretty decent state thanks to one Admiral Green Bull, providing a wonderful floral arrangement as a result of his fight battle. But that lovely lifesome nature only exists near the flower capital. The rest of the country is still a desolate mess and the people have not forgotten, hence why Yamato is being assaulted by infants. Which reminds me a lot of the start of Robin's flashback where the kids were throwing stones at her because they thought she was a monster. Which in the anime was a tomato.
Tomato, I'm throwing tomatoes.
Because I don't think that Toei wanted to promote kids throwing rocks at each other. Now, committing genocide on the other hand, that was perfectly acceptable to show. But this is Yamato's first opportunity to change the impression here. And it is very much following in Oden's footsteps because he was once a very undesirable individual. No one wanted him around and he had to travel all across the country gathering his vassals and earning the trust of the country. So these kids might get into some trouble and Yamato will help them out, or Yamato might do something stupid and Luffy-like to make them laugh. But whatever happens, this is the beginning of the legend of New Oden. We then pick up with Kaku and Stussy having a chat that we really don't have time for with the almost literal apocalypse happening around us, but it is very sweet nonetheless. Kaku's doing that classic One Piece thing of pushing someone away with harsh words, while deep down showing how much he truly cares for them. It's very evocative of Sanji leaving Baratier with everyone shitting in his soup. No, wait, shitting on his soup? In the soup would be unforgivable for chefs at sea. Or like how Dr. Kureha yelled and violently chased Chopper off Drum Island. What's happening here is an Oda staple and it gets me every time. I've recently been going through a lot of Water 7 stuff again, both the anime and the manga, and I'd forgotten just how much I loved Kaku before, during, and even after his betrayal. He was and still is my favorite Cypher Pole agent, and what I'm really loving is that Egghead is bringing Kaku full circle and threatening to return him to that nice, genuine guy that I thought he was at the beginning of Water 7. It's not even a character arc, it's a full character circle. But if character development was a race, then Rob Lucci would be lagging way behind. Because Kaku is saying this to spare Stussy the wrath of Leopard Man, who I guess is going to remain loyal to the world government probably. So long as Kaku makes it out of this okay, he has no real reason to go against them. Oh, and just to briefly jump around a bit, something that very much surprised me in this chapter was Saint Shepherd Jupiter actually going to the trouble of safely depositing the other Cypher Pole agents onto the Marine ships. I mean, safely. He sort of went pop and they all fell on the ships, thankfully. But realistically speaking, what was happening here was Saint Shepherd Jupiter saving the Seraphim. He had to claim them and the Cypher Pole agents just happened to be in the same area. But it's very surprising to me that Jupiter didn't do something horrible to them just for the sake of it. That's just how I'm trained to be prepared to be with the Five Elders now. But from the perspective of those lower ranking Cypher Pole agents, they were just saved by an Elder Star, further blurring the lines between good and not good. Of course, this is insanely bad though, because this means that the world government now has control of all 7 Seraphim. And I feel a bit bad for Esper in particular, because in my mind, he belongs with Bonnie. Remember, this is a Kuma clone. He's not a mindless pacifista. He is a full-on Kuma with some fun extra bits. And I guess that might give Bonnie something to fight for in the future. She got her original dad back, but now we need to get second dad back. And there is a curious discussion between Lilith and Atlas in this chapter, where Atlas reminds us that York is keeping track of them. And then Atlas does what I think has a phenomenal chance of causing her inevitable death, which is to run away from safety in order to accomplish one last mission. And Atlas makes it sound like she's going to check in on the rest of the Straw Hats, but there's clearly something else going on here. One idea I have is that Atlas could be deliberately sacrificing herself because she knows that York is able to track her, and so the Straw Hats, as well as what's left of Stella's corpse, will never be safe so long as she's with them. So it could be a way to distract the Five Elders, because eliminating Atlas and Lilith is their top priority, or it could be less self-sacrificial, and Atlas identifying a need to cut both her and Lilith off from Punk Records. But this 99% solidifies what I've been thinking, which is that either Lilith or Atlas is probably going to die. We'll get to escape with one Vegapunk if we're lucky. And if Oda really wanted to just twist the knife, we could escape with neither. I say that neither is a possibility because we did go to a lot of trouble to bring Vegapunk's body back to the giant warrior pirate ship, which maybe indicates that he's not dead or there's a slight chance of a revival, because otherwise what we're doing is sailing around with a very morbid collection of old man meat. Although thinking about building the darkness of the final saga, the darkness that the Dawn Boy is eventually going to have to get rid of, it would be pretty discouraging if the only faction that had access to punk records was the world government. And without any Vegapunks to help us, it falls to say, Frankie, to take up the mantle of his non-consensual mentor and find a way into punk records to make Vegapunk's dream come true and deliver all of the knowledge to all of the everyone. But there are two key highlights of this chapter for me, actually 3 counting the man in the box. But continuing on from chapter 1118, we do get to see the expected combo attack, but my expectations were not expecting this. It's such a crazy combination of people that were involved here. Luffy, Bonnie, Sanji, and Frankie. This is such a bizarre team up of powers that don't traditionally complement each other as much as other crew combinations, like say a fish throwing a bowl of moss at a centaur. It's a really cool idea though. Luffy restrains Marcus Mars, and then everyone else creates the force to send Team Rocket blasting off again. It's a great idea, but with a couple of thoughts attached. Firstly, I don't know how ultimately effective this is going to be. We don't have a great understanding of how this works, but so long as there's an Elder on Egghead Island, or maybe at least St. Saturn, can he not just teleport Marcus Mars back, like how he got them all to Egghead from Marijois? I guess it might not work mid-air, you might need a surface to have the funky symbol appear, but they all have long-distance telepathy, so yeah, I'm sure that the older men will work it out. The second thing is that I believe that this is the first time we've seen Jewelry Bonnie use Haki, because her giant fist looks partially coated in it when she's giving Luffy that rather girthy backshot, and it might be the case that her using the Gear 5th form has unlocked Haki for her, or at least given her the ability to use it whilst in this form of maximum freedom. Because even Bonnie seems surprised at what's happening here. She questions Luffy, confused as to why he's in pain, and Luffy's like, mate, yeah, of course. If you used the Haki, it's gonna feel no great. So this could be Bonnie's first experience of Haki. Now that she's completely free, Bonnie is able to conjure and express her own willpower instead of feeling trapped and powerless like she has no will of her own. Although I should point out that Sanji is also kicking Luffy with Haki, so you could argue that the owl is very much being generated by him. But I do think it's very thematically appropriate for Bonnie to be exuding her own willpower in this moment. The most unfortunate thing about this section is of course Frankie. He's the only one who lacks even the illusion of Haki. He doesn't get any black shading for that strong right at all. His hand is as bright as the dawn of the world itself. So as much as I love the idea that he was involved in this attack at all, it does feel like one of those situations where a bunch of people are lifting a heavy object at work and one person ends up with none of the weight but still pretends that they're helping nonetheless. Some thoughts on Bonnie in general though. I think she is really suited to the sun god aesthetic. It's so wild and wacky that it very much enhances those childlike impulses, and that's something that Jewelry Bonnie has never really been allowed to be. Her whole life has been a struggle just to be a child. She had very few friends, she was locked inside for most of the time and then on the run for the rest of the time. So it's great finally being able to see her act the way a 12-year-old really should be acting, with wild imagination and reckless disregard for everyone and everything around her. And I also really like the concept of the dawn balloon as an attack, if only because Luffy's spherical shape in the sky is taking him that one step closer to becoming a literal sun. And it's at this point that I think the more outspoken denizens of the internet can breathe a collective sigh of relief, because Bonnie seriously struggled in this chapter and had to revert back to her base child form after one punch, proving that she can barely do a fraction of what Luffy can in this form, which was definitely the right call by Oda. I love that Bonnie has access to the form of maximum freedom, but that's really all it should be, a symbol of her growth and her character arc. And I also love Bonnie's dialogue after returning back to normal, the whole, mate, this freedom, oh, it's exhausting. Because it is. Generally, freedom isn't something you get to experience without constantly fighting against someone or something who wants to take those freedoms away in whatever form it may be. So it's a tiring endeavor to maintain peak freedom, and it goes to show just how much of a freedom monster Luffy is, that he can keep this going for as long as he can. So what's happened here is actually the opposite of what people were worried about, which is that Bonnie using this would take something away from Luffy. No, it actually added something to Luffy by showing us for the first time just how difficult it is to actually maintain. Although this chapter had no difficulty maintaining my interest because my dude is back, Charlotte Katakuri has appeared fully healed and carefully watching the words of Apple Gramps. And I'm not sure, but I think he's standing in Chocolate Town on Cacao Island. It's difficult to tell because a lot of the Totoland Islands do look very similar, but it would be a well-chosen location because the minister of Cacao Island was Charlotte Pudding, who's being kidnapped, and Katakuri, mate, remember that family that that you love, we should probably go do something about that. Because really, capturing Charlotte Pudding may be one of the worst things that Blackbeard has ever done. Not in terms of morality, but in terms of how it's going to come back at him. Because it gives Katakuri an excuse to join Luffy in the fight against Blackbeard. But thinking on it again, this could also be the Ice Cream Island, because next to Katakuri is Charlotte Moscato, Minister of Gelato. Although I recall that island being very different with houses that all looks like scoops of ice cream. Pretty cool, but probably wouldn't want to live in them. Anyway, there are a lot of Charlottes in this panel, but I'm not going to go through all of them because I honestly don't think that anyone but me cares. Instead, holy crap, this is a flashback because of all places that we could have cut to, we check in on the island of rare animals where we see Gaimon and his girlfriend Sarfunkel, which is a play on Simon and Garfunkel, which I just learned is called a spoonerism, where you switch consonants or vowels for some reason. And I believe that this is Sarfunkel's first proper appearance in the manga. She was featured on the cover of chapter 620 for the From the Decks of the World cover story, where she was described as a quote barrel woman. No idea how she ended up on the island of rare animals. And look, I'm not too much to focus on romance in One Piece. I find it greatly unnecessary and it gets in the way of all of the battle fighting. But nothing makes me happier than to see these two together, especially after Gaimon spent 20 years on that island and even elected to stay there because he couldn't bear to leave his animal friends behind. So I love that he got his happy ending in however many ways that statement can be taken, because to him, the dawn of the world is already here. This is Gaimon's happily ever after that we're just periodically checking in on. And this is another reminder that anyone can do it. If a man in his box in his 40s can score a woman in a barrel, then so can you, viewer who is listening to me right now, probably on the toilet. And then I guess we should probably talk about the massive revelation of the chapter, because we end on yet another Iron Giant cliffhanger. Mildly annoying because there's another break next week, and Oda always does this. He saves the Iron Giant cliffhangers for the break weeks. But this one isn't too bad because it was a pretty phenomenal ending. Because we hear Joyboy speak for the very first time. I mean, not here, but we read the words on page that he's speaking in the memory of a robot. Although it's actually kind of vague. It might not be a memory. It might not be a flashback. That's what I assumed at first. But Joyboy seems to be speaking in the present tense. So in a crazy way, maybe the Joyboy is speaking to the Iron Giant right now. Either way, mark this on your calendars because approximately 1 year from now is when the anime is going to reveal what Joyboy actually sounds like. Unless they cop out and have the Iron Giant say the text instead, which they could, it's in quotation marks. And as a reminder, we're also rapidly closing in on finally hearing what Emu sounds like in the anime, because those Reverie flashback episodes are going to be coming in very, very soon. But Joyboy also says the name of the Iron Giant, which at the moment there's a slight uncertainty as to how it's pronounced. The Japanese text is katakana and it says Imeto, which is probably going to be either Emeth or Emmet, which is incredibly appropriate no matter which way it goes. Emeth and both spellings of Emmet mean various forms of truth. For example, Emmet with just one M means truth, then Emeth with two M's means truth from beginning to end, and Emeth means a much more firm truth. The kind of truth that doesn't care about your personal boundaries and will not take no for an answer. And until we know a bit more, it's probably pointless diving into the literary and mythological inspirations that Oda could have taken from with this name. But in the whatever's happening here, the flashback or the modern day shenaniganry, Joyboy is telling him to do a thing when the time comes. The implication being that the time is now, the thing is the pig, and Emeth needs to punch it like real hard. Which he does, and it's incredible because it breaks Walkyree's tusk off. Remember, this is the tank of the Five Elders. The guy that not even Luffy in Gear 5th could break with raw force, and Emeth made him look like he had the structural integrity of an uncooked 2-minute noodle. And it looks like this is just his punch power. I mean, I made fun of Frankie earlier for being the only one without Haki in the team-up attack, but after seeing this, like, who needs it? Not Emeth. So I wonder if Emeth is built out of a special material, something so tough that we couldn't even begin to dream of replicating it, or if there's some other power system at play here. A taste of how the ancients once fought. And it would be massive if next chapter, it was revealed that Walkyree was not able to regenerate from this attack, and that gives us our first clue of how to put these geriatrics in their long overdue graves. I love the final panel of the chapter. It's amazing because it's Luffy with his starry eyes. It's the same way he gets whenever he sees a new Frankie invention. Luffy thinks that this is the coolest thing he's ever seen, and I hope that they're able to communicate. Luffy should maybe be able to hear the giant via the voice of all things, and who knows? Luffy might even want to pilot it because he did originally attempt to get inside the Iron Giant when he, Chopper, Jinbei, and Bonnie first discovered it. So what happens is Luffy hops in and serves as both the pilot and the power source, and One Piece finally evolves into its final form, which is a full-on mecha series. But there's still quite a bit left to dissect with this chapter, which we'll get into in the next video. And to be informed of this future offering, please do subscribe to this channel for consistent injections of One Piece culture administered directly into your YouTube feed.